So I don't get too hung up on the numbers, but more when I'm looking at that, I want to understand how much of my show are people listening to, right? And that's really the only basic the number that I look at. Now I check listennotes.com. That'll tell you where your show is ranked globally. I'm blessed to have my show ranked in the top 1.5% globally. But so I really check that, and I check how long people are actually staying on to listen to my show. But again, I don't get hung up on any of the numbers.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney. So we are back again with our guest, Erik Allen, today. He is an expert in podcasting. He's going to lay out more tips for you around the metrics that he tracks and increasing those numbers as well. Even nailing down, your presentation, right? When you're being interviewed, what should that sound like? And how do you be confident, right, in that? You're going to hear that today from him, as well as some daily habits and a morning routine that I hope you are going to listen closely to. Welcome back to another segment with Erik. I know if you listened to yesterday's show, no doubt you learned a lot about podcasting and why it is so important. And it's like the thing you need to need to be focused on for your business and branding or growth, in this new year. Our expert Erik is back again today. Welcome back to the show.
Man, thank you so much, man. Truly an honor to be here, man. I love this.
Yeah. Honored to have you again. Appreciate your time. I want to just continue continue the conversation, jump right back in. We left yesterday talking a little bit about some metric type things and or talking through how to get guests, high impact guests on the show, right? And things like that. And it's just some great tips. But what metrics do you track? You talked about, man, don't focus on it too much in the beginning, right? It can be so discouraging. However, I love tracking things, right? So we know we're improving, or maybe what is working, what is not. What do you track?
For me, I really will go in and so I use Blueberry as my host for podcasting. I would definitely recommend them. Great customer service, but they have great analytics. I used Anchor before, which was free, made the jump to Blueberry about 1.5 years ago, but their back office really gives me a lot of analytics in regards to how many of my listeners are listening to 75% or more of my show. And so that's what's interesting to me is there a fall off where people stop listening? And right now, 95% are listening to 75% or more. And so I'm okay with that. I think that's a pretty good metric for me. There's downloads, right? I can look at some shows might do 50. Some shows might do 2,000. It depends on my guest, depends on if they share it with their network, if they accept the collaboration, right? So I don't get too hung up on the numbers, but more when I'm looking at that, I want to understand how much of my show are people listening to, right? And that's really the only basic the number that I look at. Now I check listennotes.com. That'll tell you where your show is ranked globally. I'm blessed to have my show ranked in the top 1.5% globally. But so I really check that, and I check how long people are actually staying on to listen to my show. But again, I don't get hung up on any of the numbers. It's all just like, okay, cool, whatever. I know that I'm making impact at least one person's listening to that show, right? And so that's what I look at as a podcaster. I think we can get hung up on numbers where people are reaching out and their sponsors and go, how many downloads do you get? I don't know. The reason I say I don't know is because when I had Anchor for 4.5 years, and I got, 20,000 downloads on there. But then I switched to Blueberry. In the podcast world, when you switch a host site, your numbers go back to zero. So you start over literally. And so I just don't get hung up with the numbers. I'm like, hey, I don't know exactly how many downloads I have, but I can tell you that my show is ranked in the top 1.5% globally, and we're making an impact. And here's who's been on my show. And so if you want to work with me, great. If not, I totally understand. Like, I have to just have that be okay with, I'm putting out the show because I love it.
Love that. It kind of goes back to what we were talking about yesterday, picking something you're passionate about.
Yeah.
It's so helpful, right? You know, you're coming to work or you're going to podcast and you're going to get to talk about something you're passionate about, or interview somebody that's really good at something you're passionate about. Right. That's so helpful. And, are there ways that, and maybe we shouldn't get too hung up on it, but any tips on increasing, right, your reach, right? And get in front of more people.
Number one, best thing that you can do is be a guest on other people's shows. That is number one, in my opinion, how you grow your show is be a guest on other people's shows, because you don't know what listeners are going to listen to that show. Now, I've been a guest on a show where a guy lived in Tennessee, and then a radio station in Tennessee heard my episode on his show and reached out to me and said, Erik, we'd like to interview you. Well, then they interviewed me, and then they emailed me like 3 months later and said, Eric, we forgot to send you a link, but your show has 50,000 downloads. So all because I was on a show in Tennessee that someone else heard. It's the best way to get exposure is be a guest on other people's shows. That's the number one way to increase your shows. Also share it. Like when you're a guest on other people's shows, share it with your network. That's a respectful thing. Like this show will get shared to my network because I love being able to do that when the shows come out, right? It gives you exposure to your show. It gives people in my network like, oh man, that's an awesome show. I'm gonna start listening to that. It's the same way. If I'm the host, I'm sharing that out to all platforms. So my show, when it goes out to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, like all audio formats. I get it out as far as I can. Some are going to be maybe 3 people watch it, but then on other platforms, maybe you have 2,000. It just depends. And there's going to be different people on different platforms. So I say, as much as you can get your show out, do that and be a guest on as many shows as you can.
Yeah, that's so valuable. I've slacked off the last probably year and a half or so myself. I used to also try to guest probably at least show, I don't know, 2, 3 shows a week sometimes, and then sometimes
Yeah.
I'll go a month and none, and but have a yearly like goal that I'm trying to do or something like that. But no doubt, that's when other people start they hear you like you said, and they're asking you to be on their show as well, right?
Yep.
With that being said, oftentimes if you haven't been interviewed much or been or a host on a show, so you're a little nervous, right, about
Yeah.
being interviewed. You don't know what they're going to ask, and I get those questions all the time. Well, how do I know I'm prepared? And I'm going to sound crazy, right? All these things, right? How do you know you're prepared, right, Eric? How do you maybe nail down your story or
Mhm.
maybe even prepare the host, so they know how to have a good interview with you? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think for me if you've got a story to tell, write it down and just read it and go over it as much as you can. I mean, I am writing a book. It's in the draft right now. So like I've been writing that so I understand my story. But if you're like new and you're like, how do I get this? How do I get my story lined up? Write it down and read it. And if maybe have somebody that's close to you to read it as well. Oh, is that a good story? It doesn't even have to be a long story. It could just be like bullet points. Like, oh, I want to talk about this because I'm passionate about waking up early. I'm passionate about spending that time in the morning. Oh, I got to read a book every day because that helps me grow. Like, talk about things that you're passionate about, and then you never get into these gotcha type situations, right? I always want to just express to my guests, like, I'm never going to ask you the gotcha type questions. I'm going to ask you about what you and what you know, because I'm interested, truly interested in what you do to do what you're doing today. Like that's my number one goal is I want to bring value to you, but I'm so interested in learning. I heard someone talk about podcasting. It's like when you're listening to a podcast, you're almost like this kind of creeper guy, so to speak, like listening into an intimate conversation between 2 people, right? And that might sound funny, but it truly is. Like you people that are listening to this show, they're like getting to sit next to you and I having a conversation. And I think that's so important and so special for someone to be able to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, definitely do that type of stuff. Yeah, it's
Uh,
always good. I think podcast is so good. And then go join Toastmasters. I'm a big proponent of Toastmasters, and that has helped me curate my story. It's helped me get better publicly speaking. It's helped me get better in dropping the uhs and the ums and all that stuff. Like, go join some sort of group like Toastmasters as well.
I helped a friend one time start a podcast, and he was a professional speaker, like a highly paid speaker, but he never had a podcast. you
Okay.
know,
Yeah.
so we would meet maybe every other week, 30 minutes to an hour, and I would help him with it, getting his podcast going, and then he would help me with some public speaking, and we would tally every time we heard a or a ah from each other in the, a little competition, right? Just during
Yeah.
the call, and that was so helpful just to get me thinking that way. And I haven't done it enough lately, but that was so helpful. Another thing you mentioned was writing down your story. It just helps you be prepared, right? And you're going to
Totally.
come with more confidence into the interview because you've thought through this.
Yeah.
And I've seen people do this a number of ways. Some people put sticky notes all over their screen so they have like something to remind them they can be looking at, or they have a
Yeah.
document open that has their story. But I hired a speaking coach a number of years ago. I was speaking in front of thousands of people at one of my first biggest events to speak at. And I thought, oh my goodness, I only had 10 minutes, but it's like the first 10 minutes of I'm opening this event, and it was a big opportunity. So I hired the speaking coach, and he said exactly what you said. He's like, we're going to write this out and we're going to get every word and to maximize that 10 minutes. But what that did for me is we laid out like 5 topics, like
Mhm.
5 bullets, and then just some details under each one. It also allowed me to be able to build on those, right? So I can make it into a 30-minute or 45-minute or hour-long presentation, or I can make it 10 minutes,
Yep.
and still hit those things that I'm passionate about. I love that. Even something like Toastmasters as well. Well,
Mhm.
Eric, any other tips on podcasting specifically you want to leave the listeners with before we jump to a few other things?
No, I mean, I think I'm so passionate about podcasting, and I think that if you have a story, and we all do, if you have a brand or a company, you need to share it. And whether you put that out publicly, but record it and share it with your family for legacies to come. My 10-year-old interviewed my 89-year-old grandma for a school project earlier this year. And we didn't put that on YouTube, but it was such a great interview. And my son thought of these questions that I would never have thought to ask my question that I or asked my grandma. And I didn't even know stuff about my grandma that he was asking about. But I get to save that video forever. And that video gets to change. So you have a story, you have a branded company, record it, put it on video. Even if you don't put it out publicly, save it for your legacy.
Love that, especially with the family stuff too.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's too easy to video now, even if it's just with your phone. Like, get that recorded,
totally.
right?
Yep.
Um, well, Eric, what's the biggest challenge in your business right now?
Mm. Right now, we're going through some transition, I would say, but right now, so I'm getting ready to launch my life insurance agency, and so in that's a big transition for me, going from a customer success and sales background for the last 20 years to launching a life insurance agency, and so that's kind of that new step. It's something new, but I'm excited about it and excited to get into that. Um, and I think for the podcast, it's really just I want to help more people. Like I want to help people launch their podcast. So I've got a self-paced video course that people can take on the website. They can work with me one-on-one. Like I'm trying to put out as much content as I can to help people realize that just launch a podcast is a great thing and just you can do it. You just stick with it and you don't quit. So I would say that's kind of the biggest challenge right now is I just want to help more people. And then this new life change right now with launching my agency.
What are, maybe this would be tied to that in some way, but I
Yeah.
know there's some habits that are non-negotiable for you. What
Mhm.
are what does that look like for you? Some of those habits or morning routine. How do you do that?
It starts as soon as I open my eyes. So I'm 44. As soon as I open my eyes, I immediately out loud in a whisper say, God, thank you for another day that I get to see and hug and hold my family.
Mm.
And then for me, I go downstairs and I work out. I hit the gym 5 days a week. We have a home gym that we've built over the last 10 years. So we've got some stuff down there. I hit the gym for about 45 minutes or so, and then immediately come up here to my office. And for me, that's really where I have my quiet time. I turn on worship music. I spend time reading the Bible and I spend time in prayer. My prayers are very gratitude driven, man, because I'm just so thankful that I'm here today and that I've been blessed to be able to do what I do. And, my wife and I, and we have 2 kids, they're 13 and 10, and we're raising them in a household that we didn't have, that they won't experience what we experienced as kids. And so that worship time, that prayer time for me, that's a non-negotiable. Waking up for me, non-negotiable, right? Like, when I say that, thank you, right? And I think in our minds, we have to stack wins. So for me, it's that first thank you to Jesus. That's win number one. And then I jump up and I make my bed. There's win number two. So my brain is already starting to stack up wins. And then I hit the gym, win number three, right? And then I'm in prayer time and just more thankfulness. And that's kind of that non-negotiable that helps me kind of start the day. And sometimes prayer is 5 minutes, sometimes it's 20 minutes. It really just depends on the day, but I really have to spend some time in the word before I even start my day.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I love the structure, right? And I love the gratitude first thing too, just to the
Mhm.
Lord. No doubt about it. Is there a specific time? Are you like early riser? I get questioned about this all the time because I talk about myself. I love being up early,
Yeah,
and that's kind of changed my life over the last 10 years.
for
Being
sure.
diligent about being up early and bulletproof coffee probably, but
Yeah.
speak to is there a time of day? Is there a time of the morning that you're like, man, I got to do this or certain amount of sleep or how you track that?
4 a.m., 6 days a week. I'm getting up. And that means that typically I'm asleep by 9:30. But 4 a.m. every day, it's a non-negotiable for me. That's one of those times that I have to get up. The reason that I get up early is one, it allows me to have that solo time for myself. One, to listen to music, worship, prayer, have that time with God, right? And people are like, why the heck do you wake up at 4 a.m.? And see, my desire to be successful in life as a husband, as a father, right, is more important than sleep. And so I want to be able to do that. And so I wake up early, and it allows me to have that time where I'm not cutting into family time. So that way, at the end of the day of work, I get to go spend time with my family. I don't have to worry about, oh man, I forgot to do this and that and that. I got it all done 2 hours before they wake up. Right. So waking up at 4 a.m., it allows me to get so much done throughout the day. And sometimes I'm a little bit tired, but I drink coffee and I'm drinking that coffee throughout the day. But that 4 a.m., that's that non-negotiable for me. I have to get up. And Saturdays are probably my most productive days because I am up early. My kids sleep in, they're not going to school. My wife homeschools our kids. So we're all in the house at the same time all the time. Right. And so and she's just a trooper for taking that on. But it just, I have to get up early to be able to hit that solo time.
Here I thought I was doing something over here, being up at 5 every morning. No, that's incredible. I love that diligence, and I love the thought too. I think this probably helps you get out of bed, right? The thought of, hey, this is more important than sleep, right? Or
Yeah.
being that husband, that father, and just reminding yourself of that, right? Because
Right.
it's hard to get up at 5 a.m. for me often, right?
Yeah.
It's man, alarm goes off. I'm like, are you serious? Like, and most mornings.
Right.
you know,
Sure.
but I love that thought process, and something similar to that I've often told myself is, hey, if I expect investors to hand me $100,000 or $500,000 to invest in, like, if I expect them to believe I'm diligent enough to manage that, well, like, I should be able to get out of the bed.
Yeah.
Right? I should be able
Yeah.
to, and I love having a structured morning routine, similar to what you're laying out here. Have you ever, do you and your wife ever incorporate anything together in the morning routine?
Mm. She is more of a night person than I am. And
Okay.
so typically our mornings though are I'm during the school year, I'm usually up and I'll go get breakfast for the kids. I'll make their lunch while she's getting ready, and then she'll come out, and then we're able to kind of have some breakfast together as a family with our kids, and then they start their day. And my wife starts with prayer and reading the Bible with my kids every day. And so we see each other in that. But I also have it on my calendar to be intentional to have a lunch with my wife at least once a week. And that's every Monday at 12 o'clock. I go downstairs, or 11 o'clock. And so go down, and her and I, that's when she eats as well. And so we go down and we have breakfast together every Monday. Sometimes it's a little bit later or a little bit earlier, but I have it on my calendar to make sure that no one can block off that time. It's intentional about making some time with my wife and us just to connect. And then of course at the end of the night, there's this thing I saw a buddy of mine through a mentorship class that I was in. He talked about at the end of the day, be within 5 feet of your wife for 5 minutes. No intention, just go and be around her for 5 minutes within 5 feet, whether it's close and hugging and snugging or whatever that is, but 5 minutes, and ask her about her day. Ask her how things are. How is she feeling? Right. So that's something that I would highly recommend implementing. And my wife and I do that. And it's not every day, but we try to get there and make that happen. But that you have to schedule that time to really draw close to your spouse.
Love that. Be within 5 feet for 5 minutes, asking about her day. I'm making a note of that because that's such a good routine to be in. I feel like we do that, but I'm probably not thinking about it every day like that. Just yeah. I want to almost like track that. Like, did I do
Yeah.
that today or yesterday? Or that's really good. Speak to what's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
Mm. My number one thing is my wife, I would think, I mean, well, first of all, I think God for sure. God
Sure.
has got me to where I'm at, but my wife is such a supporter in my dreams. And sometimes we have spouses where, for me, as an example, I'm a flyer. Like I want to go out and fly and make stuff happen. My wife kind of holds that string sometimes, but not in a bad way. Like, hey, you should probably think about this a little bit more before you do this. Or, oh, you know what? That's a really great idea. Maybe tweak it this way, right? So it's that support of my wife, and she knows that my dreams are wild. And as an entrepreneur, that can get crazy. And sometimes we eat like kings, and sometimes it's top ramen month, right? Like that's frustrating as a woman because she wants that, solid income coming in. And so she understands that my mindset's kind of crazy like that. But having that support from my wife has been huge. And she's like I said, she's gone through it all. But her and I have just been able to do things and do life together. And that's really helped us. when we moved to Idaho, we came here and some of our family members still don't know where we live, like because we had to break away from the toxic relationships. And we came here, we didn't know anyone. And it's just been our journey to start fresh. And that partnership that we have for coming on 19 years this year, that has made me successful, I think.
Good for you. Wow. I love that. Yeah, I always tell people my wife couldn't care less about real estate, but man, she's been one of my biggest counselors,
Yeah.
best counselors,
Yeah.
it says a lot about your leadership, I think, in your home and your humility too, that she feels comfortable to speak into these ideas that you have. Right.
Yeah.
So that's incredible. I appreciate you just honoring her in that as well. What about, how do you
Yeah.
like to give back?
Man, I love giving back. One time, like if someone needs something, I'm very much like, okay, I'm going to drop it and go make it happen, especially if it's somebody that I know or a family or friend or my wife needs something. Like my family will always come first. And I've always said that to every job. Like they'll always come first. But to give back, I think it's spending time with people. It's giving financially if you can. It doesn't have to be a lot. Maybe they just need a coffee date, right? Maybe they just need a break, right? Give them $5 for coffee, right? But I think giving back time wise is so important. Give back to your family, go help somebody, go help your neighbor. When my wife and I were first married, we did 2 trips to Tijuana to go build homes. I'd never been exposed to mission trips before. I grew up in a house where my dad said pay people to build things. I didn't know how to fix anything or do anything. My wife, she was raised by her by her grandfather, who was a shop teacher for 30 years. So she was exposed to every tool. And every tool in this house today is hers, and every tech thing is mine. And we joke about it because all the tools and his tech is kind of what our joke is. But we went down to Mexico thinking that we were going to change lives down there by building some family a home. And man, it was life change for me. We're all standing around after we built them a home and got them off the dirt floor and things like that. And we're doing a key ceremony, and us manly men are just booger crying, right? Like give back as much as you can. And it's not about, sometimes it's money, sometimes it's financially, right? But whatever you can to give back, I say that feels good in your heart, right? You can't have gratitude and give back and be angry at the same time.
Love that. Erik, thank you so much. Grateful for the time you spent with us over the last couple of days, and just, man, laid out so many valuable tips through podcasting, how to podcast, how to launch, how to get great guests as well. I love some of those tips. No doubt about it. Even your your intentionality around your morning, I think, is crucial to success. I've interviewed thousands of people now, and it's like it's a common thing, that I hear, and it's like it's not always rocket science, right? We make things so complicated at times, but it's like,
Yeah.
I love that you're that intent, and being intentional is difficult though, right?
Yeah.
It's not normal always knowing what we should do, but it's actually doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And so you are modeling that so well, and I appreciate just your transparency around your faith and your family, and what the Lord's done in your life. Thank you again for the way you've given back to us. How can the listeners get in touch with you and learn more about you?
Yeah, Erik G. Allen, or excuse me. Yeah, Erik G. Allen on Instagram is probably where I'm most active. It's ERIK. And then my website, just erikallenmedia.com. Feel free to reach out at any point. I love connecting with people on there. And then my show drops every Friday at 7 a.m. on YouTube and all audio formats, all platforms as well. But absolutely love connect with people. So make sure if you have questions, please reach out.
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.